Hi guys, welcome to the fifth episode of StingyHubby, uh, where we save more, spend less, and leverage. So let's head back to where we left off last time, and we went through the suggestions. TS, that is the utility function that we had to get suggestion, get financial advice. So we can go back to the calling function, and that is part of the finance form that we have. So before we submit the finance form, we get the suggestion, and that suggestion, once you get the suggestion, that is saved in the payload. So we create a payload that contains all the data on the form. It contains the suggestion that we get from the get finance advice and user id associated with the submission. And then what we do is, within submissions, we insert this payload. So whenever we click on the submit button, you can expect to see this getting saved within the this form, as well as the submissions getting saved into the submissions folder. So here you can see all the data, and then you would also have the suggestions saved there for every. So we are going to reuse these suggestions everywhere we can, especially on the other page for suggestions, as GPT suggestions that we have, as well as in the emails, so that we don't have to repeatedly query ChatGPT. It's done once and then used multiple times. So that brings in the usability factor that we would like to strive for. So once we reach here, we insert the data, and then we have the handle submit button that basically does the on submit. And within this we have a grid displayed. So on the UI part, we have multiple text boxes that would be for income, checking, emergency, health, retirement, credit cards, mortgage, car payments, and utilities. And they are mapped with the associated labels as well as text boxes. So once we have done that, we are using register for each of them, and then we have certain formatting for it. And then after that, we have a submit button at the end that we will use to handle the submit, and which will have a on submit event to work on. That's pretty much a financial form at the moment. uh, we don't have we had a lot of stuff initially on that one page, but then slowly I thought maybe we should be able to remove some functionality from that page and then have it saved within the different pages. And so I was able to look into that. Then next we can we looked at update finance, we looked at preference, home page, GPT suggestion. Now let's look at the finance breakdown page. Now finance breakdown page is, if you look at the UI, the finance breakdown page is a simple pie chart. So let me open that one, expense breakdown or finance breakdown. It's a simple pie chart. What it do, it looks at all your expenses, all the different categories of expenses that you have, and then creates a pie chart out of it, denoting the appropriate amount of percentage value for every pie or every category. So if you look at this pie chart, 44% is going to credit cards, which is the highest among them, and then 33% is going towards mortgage, 11% is going towards car payments, and 11% is going towards utilities. That's as per the latest entry that we made within the database, within the submissions that we made within the database. So when we look at the code associated with it, we are looking at a breakdown expense chart. So this is another component we would be using on the page. So we would do is fetch breakdown. Here we would get the, based on the associated user, we would get the user back. Once we get the user, we would then get specific fields like mortgage, car payments, utilities, and credit cards for the associated user ID in the descending order. limited to one and single. So we would get the latest submission that the user has done and all the values, expense values that for that associated user. And then we would create a breakdown constant and have it saved in the system or in the state, so that it can be used later on in another component. So the breakdown would be basically having these fields values implemented, and then after that, once we are done with the loading part, we set the loading as false, and then at that point we would get the fetch breakdown, and we would get the breakdown. We would do a fetch breakdown, that is the function that we got from the backend. And then after that, we would at the UI part, we would just have a simple header called as expense breakdown, like this on the top, like this, and then we would have loading, and then we would call the component expense breakdown chart. And then when we go into the definition of this one, this is mostly a recharts. We are using a recharts component here. We are importing that will give us a pie chart, a pie, a cell, and a responsive container. Here we denote different colors for the different sections of the pie chart. So like here you can see that you have blue, green, and orange, and then you have a responsive container within which we have a pie chart, and then we are going to give certain values. The overall outer radius of this is 200 pixels, and then inside we are going to give a label, and we are going to give a value. That value will be based on the total, or actually we are going to calculate the percentage. So to calculate the percentage, what we are going to do is get the total, which is the sum of all the entries, and then we are going to do a percentage is the value divided by total into 100. This calculation is done over here, and then we return for every label will have a name and a percentage field associated with that. And like that we will have different sections in the pie chart. That's our pie chart at the moment. So if you look at the UI part, you would see mortgage will have its name and then 33.3% as the pie chart value to be used within it. So that's our pie chart mostly. Let's go down, the expense breakdown chart, that's what we call it. Yeah, and then we come out to the calling function, and that's our finance breakdown page. Nothing much over here, just simply a page with a component within it. And then we have a about page. The about page is the page which I showed you before was associated with what is the application, and then what certain details about myself. And this page, if you look at the backend side, it's mostly HTML. It's HTML or JSX. Mostly it has style within it. It has a text that explains what is StingyHubby. Then it has a format for myself or my resume. So here it's I'm a developer, my name is there, my contact details, something about my experience, my header, job experiences, technologies, and yeah, these are all. So mostly there are these two different area. One is my resume over here, and the other one is what the application does. So that's pretty much the about page at the moment. Now I have not been to the hooks at the moment. Hooks is user preference. Now user preference hook, this one is associated with the user preferences page. So in the preferences page you would have save preferences and load preferences. So these two functions would be part of the user preference in the hooks at the moment. And then now we are done with the pages and the component. Now we can go quickly through the component. We have the user preference component, we have the sign out button, sidebar layout, we have discussed that, GPT suggestions, goal settings. Goal settings is associated with the goals page. Now if you can see that on the UI part we have a goals page, and on the goals page we have certain values here, and when we save these values in the database we have a goals table, and then we are able to save those goals associated with the user on the in the database. Now the associated functionality for that is within the on this set goal settings.tsx. In this component we are calling the client, we are loading the goals. So when we load the goals we are getting it from the goals table, we are getting everything, all the goals for the associated user ID, the latest one that we are getting. And then we if we don't get the goals, then we show the message error getting goals. Otherwise we set goals within the system. Now in set goals we all we are now later on whenever a field is changed, and so if on the UI part we are going to have a handle change event for any time a person changes the goal, and then in handle change event we are going to set goals. And then let me go to the definition of set goals. We are going to save it in the state. Yeah, that's what we are doing at the moment. Whenever anybody makes changes to the, and then handle save. So we have a save button, save goals button, and then when we click on it, on click event will call the handle save. Go to definition. When we go to definition we come to this function on the top. This function is basically doing the saving part. So it's going to goals and it's going to upsert. Upsert is these days like it's kind of a hybrid between update or insert, and then here you would pass in the goals on the screen, and then you would have the user ID associated with the user, and then you will have either the goals are saved or the or we have failed to save the goals if there are any errors, and we would display the error message in the console. So that's pretty much the goal settings component. Editable financial history is a component which I used at one point, but later on it has now been removed, and now we are looking at the editable finance history TSX. It was a wrapper before, but now we no longer use this wrapper. Financial form, we looked into it before. It's about all its finance form is the component that is going to insert the payload into the system. We have a submit button for it, we have discussed that already. Feedback form is that area where we can, or it's a component where we can either report a feature or a bug in the system that we want. And then we would also have a title, a text title, and a text set description that we can use to submit our feature request or bug report. We discussed the expense breakdown chart, then looked at email auth with captcha. This is associated with the login functionality, and then we have the editable finance history. Now our history page, whenever we go to the history page, we are seeing this editable, and then we are seeing these rows, and in on every row we would have a save button and a delete button. So to make the entries editable, that this component is associated with that. So initially we have a responsive container, it has a line chart, and it has it is going to show the history, it is going to show all the different sections or different fields that we have saved in our submission. So we would have those listed, and then we would have the colors associated with that. displayed so every field will be displayed in a different color. And then below you would have the same fields listed, and then you would have for every row that is displayed below, we will have a editable row, and then editable row we have those fields associated with it and those text boxes that we can change. And every row will have a save row and a delete row. Now when you say save row, you would go to the editable finance function and into the save row function, and in the save row functions you would update the changes that you have made in the submissions table in the database associated with the id. Now this is the row id in the database. So when you go to the database within a submission, every submission will have a row id. For example, this submission has a row id of 78, so we would use that row id and we would update that submission. And when we do the delete row at the bottom, it will go to the submissions table and it will delete the row that has the id that we specify within our UI. So having an id for every row entry is essential for us to track it, update it, or delete it in the future. So that's the editable finance history. We have the auth section. Now auth section is simple auth component that we will have, where we basically say we are going to use Google as a provider for us to log in, and we will have the auth buttons. Auth buttons are also associated with the authorization. This I think was used a few iterations before, and then later on we it has been changed now. I don't know if we still use auth buttons or not, but we can check that. Let's go Control C and we can check within the application where all auth buttons are used. So right now, yes, auth buttons are only used within the auth button.tsx. They are not used across the application. So I think this is decommissioned at the moment. So that covers up all the components within this application. All we looked at the pages. Now within auth we have a auth.txt. Now auth.txt is associated with this button. Yeah, this button is the sign in with Google, which says sign in with Google. So this is associated to when we log out of the system. If we log out of the system, we have that one button here, sign in with Google. That's the one that we see on this button. And yeah, that's pretty much the auth component that we would want to use at the moment. We talked about assets before. We've talked about utilities. We have a GPT utility which is using the OpenAI API component or API key, which is saved in the env file. And then we have the suggestions, and we have the sync user. Sync user is one of the functionality that whenever a user logs in, they should be synced with the DB, sync user to DB. Here what you would do is you would update the users table and have an upsert. If the user doesn't exist in the table, then you would make an entry for the ID, email ID, and name, or you can update it if anybody has changed their name, ID, or have a different email address associated with them. So basically this is to keep track of what user is in the system, and later on use this user in the session to be used across the board within the application as the user is logged in. So we have sync user. For that we looked into the parent or root app txt with all the routings within it. Yep, that's pretty much it. I think we have covered in. If you guys feel that there's anything that we need to cover more into this, or any of the pages I missed out, then do let me know about it. Yeah, definitely this has been a big one where I had to go into 2 episodes to go through the code. uh, in the next episode we are going to look into the feedbacks and bugs, and we are going to tackle one feedback and try to go through the whole process of what is the feedback, what is the bug, and then try to reproduce it on the UI. And then we would do some vibe coding. We would go through and ask ChatGPT about such solutions for this, and then work around with ChatGPT or follow what ChatGPT suggests, and then we would be able to resolve it in the next episode. Till that time, it would be very helpful if you could like and subscribe this video, and let me know how it goes in the comments. How do you feel about the video, or is there anything we can improve on within the application or within the video? Thank you so much for your time, guys. Have a good rest of the day.